So before we get into casting Finnick, I would like to remind everybody of the description of Finnick that we are given in the book, because I think a lot of people have read Catching Fire only once or maybe twice, and they haven't looked at it in a long time. So Finnick first appears on page 208 of the U.S. hardcover edition of Catching Fire, and first of all, the first thing that we really learn about him is that he has sea green eyes that are so beautiful they're famous. Katniss describes them as famous. Finnick O'Dare's famous sea green eyes are only inches away from mine. He pops a sugar cube in his mouth and leans against my horse. And then after he offers her a sugar cube, she goes on to describe him a bit more. We learn that he is 24 years old because he was in the 65th Hunger Games when he was 14. So if you do the math, that means that he's 24. It says that he has an extraordinary beauty. He's tall, athletic, with golden skin and bronze-colored hair, and those incredible eyes. And I just want to emphasize the hair color because I feel like a lot of people think that Finnick is blonde or ginger, but he has bronze-colored hair, which to me is sort of like a brown color, but with like hints of red and blonde in it. So he's not really blonde or red-haired or red-headed. So that's sort of his physical description. And the last thing I want to mention is something that I was reminded of when I was rereading this page. I had totally forgotten that Finnick actually took the sugar cubes from the horse's supply of sugar cubes. For some reason, I just thought that he was walking around with sugar cubes, but he apparently took them from the horses, so that's pretty hilarious. I had forgotten all about that. So that's sort of our physical description of Finnick. And, of course, the physicality or the physical aspect is only one part of what makes up his character. His character is incredibly complex and multifaceted, as we learn throughout Catching Fire and Mockingjay. So not only will the part require someone who is universally attractive, but it will also require someone who's capable of portraying a character who is very deep and layered. Does anyone, before we continue, want to sort of add to that overall description of Finnick? Shylah, I know that you have sort of spent a lot of time thinking about Finnick since you wrote the Finnick and Annie web series for Mainstay Pro. Do you have any other sort of qualities that you would like to contribute that this actor needs to possess?
Well, I have a feeling about why casting Finnick, and please, God forbid, help watch out on the chat room and in Twitter because I'm going someplace with this, I promise. Casting Finnick reminds me a lot of casting Edward Cullen for the Twilight films. And here's why. Because Edward Cullen was built up to be the most descriptive word that you got was perfect. He's beautiful. He's, kind of this everything you could want. And I think that's why Finnick is so lovable. He's very attractive. He's very handsome. And he's kind of, this, at least on the surface for the Capitol, this perfect guy. And I think that, and women listening might disagree with me, but I think that the wide range of fans, that means a different thing to different people. And I think that's why we're seeing such a range of casting choices, because what's attractive and a perfect man for me isn't necessarily a perfect person for somebody else. And so it reminds me a lot. And I wasn't a big part of the Twilight fandom. I just remember that there was a lot of mixed feelings about Rob when he was cast as Edward. For me, he doesn't look like how Edward Cullen is described in the books, but now, it's what he is. So I think that's what makes Finnick hard, is that your idea of perfection is so personal to you that it's hard to find an actor that's going to please everyone.
That's a great point. And Adam, as a male, do you sort of see any of this differently, or do you feel the same way? Is it as important to you as it is for us, maybe?
I don't think it's quite as important to me. However, I think I've spent enough time around all of you that it just kind of spread to me by osmosis. And I don't want to see any of you upset, and I know so strongly how you all feel that I'm basically a proxy now for women of the world, I think, in some way. So for that reason alone, while I might not personally care as much about how good-looking he is and how perfect he is, I really want him to be that character that all these fangirls are going around saying, yes, they got it right. In addition to the literary people, I mean, that's the real challenge, I think. You're looking for someone who is, as we're saying, incredibly handsome, just jaw-droppingly good-looking, and yet at the same time, he also has to have the acting ability and the depth to please not only the people who want the surface aspect, but also a real character and the literary types. And that's a real challenge, and that's why I think it's easy to find a few good-looking people, and it's easy to find some good actors. But to find someone who's both is proving to be kind of a challenge. And I think that's the rub, I guess you could say. That's the sugar
it is
in this equation.
And I think that's the difference, is that this character isn't Edward Cullen. This is a character with multiple layers who really has to play. I mean, whoever gets cast has to have that huge range that, is rare in actors. You close that window down to actors who are age appropriate, then you close it further to actors who fit the description or can be made to fit the description. And I mean, there's not a whole lot of people who can fit the bill.
And you mentioned age, and I think that's something we should throw out there. And someone mentioned this on Twitter too, so I thought I'd bring it up. So many, and we'll get into this a bit more when we talk about some of the fan favorites, but I've seen a lot of people tossing actors' names out there who are young, who are either, 19 or early 20s. And we have to remember that Finnick is 24 in Catching Fire, and Katniss and Peeta are 16, 17. So considering that we have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old playing 16 and 17-year-olds, the actor playing Finnick should probably either be, 24 or older. Someone in his mid to late 20s, I think, would be a really good range, because he has to look older than Katniss and Peeta. He cannot look like one of their classmates from, the District 12 high school. And I just hope that people realize that, because a lot of the fan favorites that are sort of floating around out there look as young as Jennifer and Josh, if not younger. And that just won't work, because Finnick does need to be an older Victor. I mean, he is an older Victor, so the actor has to look older than Josh and Jen. Does anyone else have any preliminary thoughts they'd like to throw out before we sort of share our favorite actors? Okay.
I do. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Please.
Let's just keep going.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Rebekah?
No, just start.
Okay.
Start it already.
So Rebekah, and in fact, I would like to start with Rebekah. So what we're going to do is we are all going to sort of share our favorite Finnicks. Then we will talk about some of the fan favorites that we did not mention. We might even talk about some of our least favorite choices out there. And then we'll read some of your picks that you shared with us on our promo post.